Hi everyone. It was pointed out to me that in my last video I didn't introduce myself. So if you didn't know already, I'm Zoe Barlow and this is my new channel, Unicorns and Board Games. In this video I'm going to be talking to you about my top 10 nature games. I picked that theme really inspired by the Dice Tower. One of their recent videos was this theme and it was one that just really jumped out to me. Nature is one of my favourite themes in board games. Guaranteed if I see a game that looks even a slightly bit to be related to nature, it's one that I'll pick up and have a closer look at, particularly if it's got some really nice beautiful artwork on the cover, which games of this theme tend to have. I like this theme because it's a bit different to the typical theme that people might associate with board games. I think it has a bit of a reputation for being somewhat of a masculine hobby, masculine themes, war and sci-fi, and something like nature makes it much more have a wider appeal for different audiences that perhaps otherwise wouldn't be interested in board games. I've had a lot of success playing nature games with people like my mum, somebody who, you know, wouldn't really be interested in a war game or a sci-fi game, and I think that it does have the ability to widen the audience. And we've seen loads of amazing nature games come out recently. It seems to be the in theme at the moment, but there's loads of different things to explore within nature. We've had games about wildlife, animals, birds, insects, plants, trees, conservation, loads and loads of different things. And unlike themes like sci-fi, for example, where it might be quite a niche thing where the audience has to have an invested interest in it, nature is something that can just appeal to anybody. If you're not a sci-fi fan, you're not going to understand the tropes that appear in a sci-fi game that are connected to perhaps the films or literature of that subject area. But nature, really, anybody can understand what's going on in a nature game because it's something that we all share. You know, we experience nature in our daily lives, so it's really got wide appeal, and I really like that about it. And I like being able to use games to get new people into the hobby and show people that there is a different side of board games. It's not just you know, that sort of stereotypical thing that people might think in their heads that I mean when I say I like tabletop hobby board games. That actually there's loads of really lovely, beautiful, pretty, girly games out there as well, and that's why today I'm going to talk to you about nature games. So this is my top 10 nature games. Number 10 is a game called Arboretum. Arboretum's a bit of a set collection, tile laying type game, and in it basically you're trying to build your own arboretum and you're trying to attract visitors to come and walk through the rows of trees that you've planted in your arboretum. All the cards have different pictures of different trees on, so you've got like cherry blossom, oak, maple, blue spruce and so on, and you're placing them down trying to score for the trees that you have the most of that type and in specific sequence on your player area. There's a bit of strategy in sort of thinking about which cards you choose to place and which cards you choose to keep in your hand, because at the end of the game the person who scores for each tree type is the person who has the card of the highest of that type in their hand. So even if you had spent all game building up a beautiful arboretum of cherry blossoms and you're certain you have the highest score in cherry blossoms on the table, unless you have managed to retain the highest number cherry blossom in your hand of all the players, you won't score it. So that makes an interesting element of choosing which cards you play and which cards you keep based on what's going on in your board, but also maybe based on what's going on your opponent's board. You might be sort of watching what they're doing and thinking about maybe keeping cards in your hand to stop them from scoring as well. Arboretum's one I've played a lot at 2 players. It plays really nicely at different player amounts. It plays in a reasonably short period of time. It's very easy to learn, easy to play. It's a lovely fun little game. Number 10, Arboretum. Number 9 is Kodama. Kodama the Tree Spirits. Kodama might seem like a strange pick for nature games because it is sort of fantasy, it's not real world nature. You've got these little sort of Kodama beans that are in it, fantasy, but as you're playing it, it really, you know, the theme of nature does come out because in it you're essentially growing your tree. So all players start with a trunk card that they place down on the table in front of them, and your trunk card will have a symbol on it for each player. Might be cherry blossoms again, might be mushrooms or fireflies or whatever. And throughout the game you're taking branch cards and placing them, layering them on top to grow your tree, and you're trying to connect the symbols that appear on the branch cards and trace them all the way back down to your trunk to score for the different symbols. The game's played over a series of rounds. Each round is a season, and each season you reveal something called a decree card, and the decree cards have different rules on them that will change the scoring for that particular round and give you a different objective with how you choose to build during that round. So each time you play it, it can be really different. Sometimes you might find that you're growing you know, really long long branches, and in other games you might be creating lots and lots of little small branches with lots of clusters of symbols around it, depending on what the decrees are and what your objective is as well. You have your own sort of private objectives that you can play with too, and as you play through the game, you grow on the table this really sort of beautiful tree in front of you, and it's a game that I really enjoy to play, not just for the competitive element of playing a game, but it's like an activity, like a fun thing to do, sort of in the same way as painting. You know, you're growing a tree and watching it grow. It's really relaxing, nice game to play. Yeah, that is number 9, Kodama the Tree Spirits. Number 8 is Lotus, another card placement game. Just pure coincidence that the third 3 on this list have been sort of very similar in how you play them. In Lotus you're placing cards and overlapping cards just like in Kodama, but instead of building a tree, you're planting flowers in your garden, and all the cards are petals of flowers. So as you overlap them, you can watch the flowers grow. And again, it's another one that visually on the table is really beautiful, really pretty to watch it build up sort of your garden of flowers as you place them. So the cards, as I say, they overlap and they form flowers on the table. All the different types of flowers have a different amount of cards for the petals that they have, with I think iris being the fewest, having 3 petals, 3 cards to complete it, and the lotus with 7 petals being the largest. So you're trying to complete these flowers on the table, but unlike with Kodama, where you're building your own tree, in Lotus you're collaboratively, building the flowers on the table with all the other players around the table. So you might start a flower off with its first petal or first few petals. Somebody else can contribute to that and add petals to it as well. The way that you're scoring in this game though is you're placing, you have these cute little sort of meeple pieces that are your guardians, butterflies, dragonflies, ladybugs, and you're placing them on the flowers, hoping to have the most guardians on a flower when it's completed, when it's time for scoring. It's another game that's beautiful. I'm going to say that a lot through this video because a lot of these games of this theme, that's That's the thing that draws me to them. You know, they're beautiful, have beautiful artwork, visually look fantastic on the table, and yeah, Lotus is no exception. Stunning game, really fun to play, really easy to learn as well. Plays very well with younger players who can quite easily grasp the concept of what you're doing, because you're watching these flowers grow. It's quite intuitive in what you're doing, and then you can sort of gradually introduce the slightly finer details in the more complex rules. Lovely game. Number 8, Lotus. Number 7 is the game that I think I couldn't really make this list without mentioning it. It's the game that people will be expecting me to say today, and that is, of course, Wingspan. Wingspan is a game that has had massive mainstream success over the last couple of years since it was released. You know, it's been seen it in stores like Waterstones and in the US in like Target, and it's one that has really appealed to loads of different people outside of just the board game hobby community, and it's because of its theme, of its relatable theme that lots of people will be drawn to. So Wingspan by Elizabeth Hargrave and by Stonemaier Games. Something with Stonemaier Games we've just come to expect over the years from them is component quality is going to be exceptional, and Wingspan's no exception there. It has this cool dice tower, like cardboard piece in the game that's in the shape of like a bird feeder. It comes with these little plastic eggs. You can get speckled glittery ones as well as an upgrade. So in Wingspan, you're collecting birds, you're putting them into the correct habitats, laying eggs on them. Different birds have different abilities. So, you know, for example, some might be predators and will hunt and eat the smaller birds. The artwork is another one. In this game, all of the cards have lovely illustrations of birds that are sort of reminiscent of like old wildlife bird watchers books, the same sort of style art, really stylized and lovely, but it is really enjoyable, lovely game. That is number 7, Wingspan. Number 6 is Meadow. If I was ranking this list on how much the game immerses me into the theme of nature, Meadow would be number 1. How I've chose to rank this 1 to 10 is in my enjoyment of the game. So number 1 is my favourite game to play out of this, regardless of how well it fits the theme of nature. But Meadow is absolutely everything about it feels like you are, you know, the whole point of the game is that you're out exploring and appreciating nature. In it, you're collecting cards to try to attract different creatures, which makes it really thematic. So, for example, if if you don't have any grubs, any bugs, you're not going to get any birds come and visit your meadow. If you don't have any birds, you're not going to have any of the bigger predators, or you know, it works very thematically for how you would expect nature, to how it works in the real world, which makes it quite intuitive to play. You know, you'll understand quite quickly and grasp quite early on in the game what you need to do to get different sort of cards and to be able to meet the requirements for different things to come into your meadow. So you're like an explorer, and you're off out in the countryside, wandering through the meadows and looking at the birds and the trees and all of the different wildlife, and everything's all thrown into it. And as I say, you're taking cards and you're putting them down in front of you, building up your own little tableau. There's a little bit of an element of worker placement in it, where as you're placing your pieces to select which card you want, it gives you an option of an ability that you can do for playing your cards or playing more than one card on that particular turn. every single card in the game has a unique piece of artwork on it, so visually it's really rich and diverse. You know, there's nothing duplicated across the table. Everything is unique, which it does add that extra little thing to it, you know, as you're playing it. As you get something new, it's always, you know, like something brand new, which adds to the theme as well, you know, the idea of exploring and seeing new things. And that is my number 6 nature game. That is Meadow. Number 5 is Everdell, which again may be a strange pick for this theme for nature, because it's more fantasy. You know, you're not in the real world. You're in this sort of fantasy realm where all the woodland creatures are all alive and have little characters. But as you're playing it, the nature theme really comes through visually on the table. You know, it looks like an appreciation of nature. It's a sort of tableau building, work placement game. The cards as you're taking them, so you have like different locations and then different creatures that live in or work at those locations. So for example, if you took the post office, that goes with the carrier pigeon and so on. The components in the game are really lovely. It has these nice sort of gummy little pieces for the berries. I always like it when a game has what feel like completely unique pieces. You know, lots of games have the same little wooden cubes or little wooden pieces that are supposed to be you know, I don't know, wheat or people or different things, that they're the same resources that you see in games. Everdell has its own little unique pieces that I've never seen anywhere else, and they're, as I say, they're lovely little gummy squishy things. It also really does have an amazing table presence because it has this big like tree centerpiece for storing your cards. That whilst is visually lovely, is completely redundant in the game. It's pointless, you don't need it. But the tree does add something to the game, because I think sometimes, at least for me, part of the game experience is that sort of visual element, is looking at the table and seeing how awesome the game looks. And certainly if you're playing it at like a game group or at a con, you know, you've got it set on the table, it's the kind of game that's going to attract people when they're wandering around to come over and have a look at what's going on your table. Everdell is one of those. It does have amazing table presence, and that is Everdell. Number 4 is Genotype. In Genotype, you are growing pea plants, and you are trying to sort of alter the genes of your plants to achieve the characteristics that you want. So, you know, for example, you might want it to be really tall, you might want to have a certain colour flowers, and the way that you do that in the game is you're rolling these dice, and the dice will give the different combinations of the genes, so that you will be able to place those and select how many of those different genes are available to select on that round. And it's got a really cool mechanic where you can alter the genes, so certain genes become more available and certain genes perhaps aren't available at all. It's worker placement. There's lots of different spots around the board for you to be able to do different things. You can hire an expert, one of the monks in the monastery, to come and give you one of their special abilities. You can do things like get tools or things like fertilizer or what have you to help you with your plant growing. Yeah, it's really informative. The setup, the layout of the game visually, it's very thematic in how the illustration and the artwork links to the theme, in the style of it, you know, as if you're keeping like a notebook of your progress as a gardener and a researcher. And that sort of helps you buy into the theme as well, this visual style of the game. Yeah, it's a game I really do enjoy. That is number 4, Genotype. Number 3 is another game by Elizabeth Hargrave, and that is Mariposas. In this game, you are playing through the life cycle and the migration pattern of the monarch butterfly. So you are starting off down south in the spring as your butterflies are hatching and setting out on their journey. In the summer, they're getting closer up north, and then they return back down south for the fall. And each of the rounds is played for each of these seasons. Each season will have a different objective, a different scoring thing that you'll randomly assign at the beginning of the game. And as your butterflies are flying north, they'll visit various different cities where you can collect your waypoint tokens that might give you different cards that are representative of the different life cycles, and there's different colours of those. If you collect a set, you get a special ability, which again you randomly assign at the beginning of the game. So each game will be different in that way because you'll have different abilities each time and see different abilities. And as you're flying, where you're landing, you'll be thinking about what position you want to land on. The flowers that you land on are important because you'll collect tokens of that type, and you want to collect sort of sets of the same types of flowers to perform different actions. You might land next to a milkweed so that you can hatch a next generation of butterfly, because you're trying to get generation 4 butterflies to fly back and to score the highest at the end of the game. There's lots of sort of strategy in thinking about what you want to score in this game. You can't do everything because you might decide that you want your butterflies to go really far up north and reach those waypoints high up, but then it's very unlikely that you'll be able to get that butterfly to come back down, and really you want all of your generation 4 butterflies to come back down to score at the end. It's another one that is just visually beautiful. It's a stunning board. It's so nicely laid out, not just the artwork but the graphic design of it. It's really it's just really clear what's going on. It looks so sort of professional and sleek with the black background and the nice like the font that's in it, the typeface, how it's using the different colours and how things are colour coded and colour coordinated through the game. And when you're playing it, the visuals, it's not just there for the aesthetics. They also have an important part to play in you being able to understand what's going on. Everything has really clear iconography and colour coordination so that you can easily follow what's happening at the different points in the game. It's another one that I like because of the educational element of it. I really didn't know anything about the migration patterns of the monarch butterflies before looking at this game, but it's such a lovely, unique theme for a game to use, and that when you're playing it, it really feels like you get the feel of that theme. You are rooting for your butterflies to fly and then to come back, and you maybe are a little sad when a butterfly doesn't make it. The theme is really there. It comes through really, really strong in the gameplay, in the art. Yeah, it's a fantastic game, and that is number 3, Mariposas. Number 2 is Honeybuzz. In Honeybuzz, you are sort of managing a hive of worker bees as they expand their hive and collect pollen and nectar and produce honey, and they are then selling their honey to the other woodland creatures. The bears and the forest are putting in their orders for different types of honey, and that's how you're scoring points, by selling your honey. So Honeybuzz has like a worker placement element to it where you're placing your little beeples. It comes with these really cute little bee-shaped meeple pieces that you use, placing them to indicate which type of tile that you want to take. and you're then placing your tile into your hive. And this is where Honeybuzz has a really unique mechanic to it, something that feels like no other game to me that I've ever played. If another game uses this mechanic, then please do let me know. I can't think of any. I've not played anything that feels quite like this. So as you're placing your tiles in your hive to create sort of different patterns in the hive, you'll create an empty cell, a fully enclosed empty space, and each time you do that, that's the point that it triggers the actions that you want to take. And that's where it can be a little bit complicated in the learning of the game, is figuring out what actions you want to take and actually when you get to take them and the order that you want to take them in, because unlike with other worker placement games, you don't get to take the action when you place the workers. It's in the creation of these empty cells. So once an empty cell has been created, you can do all of the actions that are then around that cell, and you can do them in any order you want. And the cells, as you create them, you can place them in different patterns for the different types of nectar that you create. There's a different part of the board where you've got your forager bee, and he's sort of moving along and foraging and collecting nectar and pollen, and that will give you sort of the nectar pieces that can be placed into those empty cells so that they can create the different types of honey that the different creatures might be asking for in their orders. And then as you create the honey, you can then go and sell it at market or sell it to meet the orders. And there's lots of different abilities. You can recruit a newbie, you can produce, you can forage. There's an action called fan where you can produce honey next to the different types of nectar. There's lots of different stuff going on in this game, and it, as I say, it feels like nothing else to me. Nothing else that I have played really feels like Honeybuzz. It's got such a unique combination of mechanics in how it unfolds, and this really interesting hive building element to it. One of the things that I love about Honeybuzz is the artwork. Again, it's another one with really beautiful artwork, and the graphic design of it. It's all really very aesthetically pleasing, very pretty and attractive of a game, and visually it doesn't look like how you expect it to play. It perhaps looks like a little cute light game, and actually it's really got some decent weight to it. It's quite heavy in the strategy and the thinkiness of it. A lot of my sort of favourite strategy games to look at visually, they're quite plain, quite boring. And again, as I said at the beginning of this, it's what I like about the nature theme. We've seen a lot of nature games that are visually very pretty and cute, but actually very heavy and very complex. And the visuals in Honeybuzz, it's another one where they really help in the learning of the game. The rule book in particular, the way that it's laid out with not just the visuals of the art but the graphic design, it's all really nicely colour coordinated and coded so that you can follow along to figure it out. This was one that very rarely is there a game where I will learn it directly from the rule book. I'll either have somebody else learn it and teach it to me, or I'll watch a video and learn how to play from that. I'm very lazy when it comes to learning to play games, I'll be honest. But Honeybuzz is one that I learned myself to play from the rule book, and I found it really, really easy to follow the rule book. It was laid out really nicely. At the end of the game, you score based on the amount of orders that you've fulfilled. There's also some end game scoring things. I think they're queens scoring cards at the end that you'll be working towards, and then your leftover sort of honey and nectar and what have you has points as well. Yeah, Honeybuzz, it's a great game, and that is number 2 of my top 10 nature games. And number one, my top nature themed board game is Ark Nova. And when Ark Nova come out, it was one that I knew that I would like. Lots of people were talking about how Ark Nova replaced Terraforming Mars. Terraforming Mars is my number one favourite game of all time, so it was one that I knew I would like it. It hasn't. I still do very much love and still play Terraforming Mars, but I can see where those similarities have been drawn with Ark Nova and Terraforming Mars. Yeah, so in Ark Nova you are building a zoo. You're collecting like animals and different things to go in your zoo. There's an element of conservation to it. As you're placing your bits in your zoo, you have your own little zoo board in front of you where you're positioning the tiles for the different enclosures and the different buildings, and you know where you position them, you're overlaying these different icons that will give you different abilities, and the positions you're placing them might be really important for what terrain you know that particular animal or enclosure needs to be in, or where on the board you know there might need to be at an edge or something like this. So that's an important thing to think about, an important part of the strategy. There's loads of other different things that you're doing throughout the game as you're collecting them, just like in you know Terraforming Mars. There's like the icons and the symbols that you're collecting that will give you the abilities to do different things, and there's different requirements for certain amounts of icons before you're allowed to get other things in your zoo. Your action selection is one of the really interesting things in the game, how you take your actions, because you have your cards for the actions that you want to take, and each time you use an action you pick up the card and you move it back to the left, so the cards go towards the right each turn, and the further right the card is, the stronger the ability on the card will be. So it's about sort of timing when you want to take certain actions and when is most optimum for taking it, for getting the best out of it. You know, for example, you might want to place 2 animals out in your park, but that card is still really far to the left, so it's not strong enough to do that yet, so you're waiting to that opportune moment. It's a very, very cool game. It's got loads of my favourite mechanics that I like to see in games all crammed into this. And for the nature theme, you know, you're building a zoo. It's all about animals. It's all about the conservation efforts in the zoo as well. So it really is a great one for this theme, and it does get you thinking about all those different elements. And that's the sort of interesting scoring for the game, is that you've got points for your conservation efforts and then points for your sort of like your excitement level. You're essentially scoring for like how cool things are in your zoo, and those things score around the track, like on opposite ends of the track, and you're trying to get them to meet in the middle and to overlap, which is very interesting because at the end of the game you might score minus points, or you might win with a really low amount of points compared to in other games where you'd score. So it does have this really interesting scoring mechanic in it, and yeah, it's a fantastic game. I love it. I really enjoy it. I really recommend it, but I would give that little bit sort of a warning beforehand that it is somewhat on the heavier side, with quite a big learning curve. I'd recommend watching some videos to learn to play it. It's not one that you want to go headfirst into the rulebook. As I said, I'm a bit lazy with rulebooks anyway, so it's not one that I would attempt to learn to play on my own. There's some great videos out there to watch to learn to play it, but once you get going, it's a really, you know, simple, intuitive play. Especially if you are familiar with games like Terraforming Mars. It does play very similar to that game. Yeah, that is number one, Ark Nova. So that was my top 10 nature games. If there's anything that I've missed, any recommendations that you want to suggest that you think I would enjoy, pop them in the comments. If you've enjoyed the video, give it a like, subscribe and all that jazz. Thank you very much for watching. Bye.